What's up, sweet people? Hello, and welcome back to my channel, or if it is your first time here, welcome especially. My name's Sally, and I really appreciate you stopping by. This week, I want to give you a glimpse into my kitchen, into the projects that I'm working on, and the rhythms that I have in place to keep nourishing and delicious food on our table. This is more so between meals, so I'm not including like the dinners that we had every night, because honestly, we had a lot of this prepped ahead of time. It's really straightforward. It's a lot of the same stuff, a lot of ground beef, a lot of fruit, a lot of potatoes and rice and that kind of thing. But I wanted to share more of these like projects that are interspersed throughout my work week, throughout my days. And I know it looks like I'm cooking all week in this video because that's all you're seeing, but I really do just want to emphasize that it is interspersed throughout a full workload, a busy week with kind of social engagements. This was a very special week. It was the week of Easter, and we had a lot of fun things going on, which also made for some fun like cooking opportunities. But this is just a small part of my day each and every day, and I want to let that be encouragement for y'all that you can fit time to cook nourishing meals and even fun treats like some of the things I'm making into your week. You just have to be intentional and think about it ahead of time. So the first thing I'm doing, this is Monday, is making some bone broth. I do have a full bone broth process and recipe in Basics, my ebook. It's a pro-metabolic starter guide, and it includes over 20 recipes. But in short, I blanched my bones. Today I used chicken necks. I can get those really affordably at our local co-op. And I also add in whatever veggie scraps I've collected over the course of the week. So I had some cilantro stems, some onions. After you blanch those chicken necks, I like to do it in the crock pot because it's really hands off and I can leave it for 24 hours. But just use honestly like whatever bones you have access to. It varies from week to week what I do, but I love to make this bone broth and sip on it first thing in the morning with some seaweed and some grass-fed butter as a beautiful way to support my thyroid. So adding in some vinegar, adding in some peppercorns, that makes it extra delicious, and then nice filtered water. Like I said, I love to make my bone broth in the crock pot because it is very hands-off. It can go for 24 hours, and that's just sitting overnight. It is the next day, and I am going to start up my sourdough starter. So it's probably pretty early in the morning right here. I wanted some loaves to be ready the next day, so I started off by feeding that sourdough starter. I have a full video on like a week of sourdough along with another one on like how to bake sourdough bread, which I can link below if you guys want to check those out, because they go super in depth into the process. And instead of me explaining how to feed a sourdough starter here, I will do it over there. But I was just making some basic sourdough loaves here, truly my favorite sourdough product, we'll say. And this is something, again, that I really intersperse throughout my days, throughout everything else I have going on. It does require intentionality. It does require some time. However, it's more like 5-minute chunks of time over the course of 2 days. And so as long as you kind of map it out ahead of time, you can just take a break from your work, stand up, work on the sourdough, and then get back to what you're doing. And I think it's really helpful in a sense because, especially if you have a computer job or you're sitting down, it's really easy to just kind of get into a trance and stay there all day. And having projects like this interspersed throughout your week helps you to disconnect for a moment, rest your eyes, do something physical, which is so important for your health as a whole. So once the sourdough was into the stretch and fold phase, I set it aside, covered it, and then I returned to my bone broth. This is now about 24 hours after I started it. I turned it off for about an hour to cool to a temperature I could work with, and I just strain it and package it up in jars to go in my refrigerator to be enjoyed throughout the rest of the week. So here you can see that I am stretching and folding my bread. And this is what I'm talking about. You do this, the stretch and folds 4 times every 30 minutes, but the stretch and folds themselves take like 2 minutes. Just fit it into your day, into your routine. This was the end result. The next day, I didn't film a ton here because my husband and I did a full day of content creation for like short form content. So I just got a few clips of some of the things we made. I had that sourdough and I had a lovely beef stew. on to the next day. This would be, it would be Thursday. We were going to a Passover dinner with some of our good friends, a traditional Seder dinner, which ended up being so meaningful and so much fun. I had never done that before, at least in that depth. And my job was to bring a salad. I'm not saying that this is a traditional Passover salad. Please don't take it as that, but it's delicious and it is honestly quite simple. I will link the recipe down below, but I like to use romaine lettuce and then shallots. So key actually with this is that you cut up everything as finely as you can. So I like to split the romaine down the middle, and then I cut pieces that are teeny tiny, and I make sure they're nice and dry. Throw them in a bowl. You cut your shallots really finely as well, and then you're gonna zest 3 lemons. You will use both the zest and the juice of these lemons, but you can see I put my shallots in a jar. I'm going to add my lemon zest over this jar as well, and I will juice my lemons over the shallots also. The recipe actually doesn't call to do this. It just puts the shallots in with the lettuce and then does the dressing separately. However, I like to make the dressing ahead of time and put it over the shallots because it helps to make them a little bit less sharp, a little bit less spicy, have a little bit less of an effect on your breath, we'll say. It softens them just a little bit. So I make my dressing. There's also salt, pepper, chili flakes in there. Set that to the side. And then the last ingredient for this salad is just going to be some Parmesan cheese, which I grated in my food processor. And since we were taking this to some friend's house later that day, I just packaged everything up in jars or in the bowl, and I mixed the components together once we were there. But definitely try this out because it is delicious and it is so simple. Okay, this is the most exciting process of the week, and it spans a few days. So we have jumped to Saturday. Now, Friday, I threw together the dough for this sourdough puff pastry. I didn't have time to film it because it was super late and I was exhausted and I just needed to throw it together. But I'll link the recipe below. It is by Farmhouse on Boone. Again, it is sourdough puff pastry. This was the first lamination that I had ever made. I was really psyched out about it for some reason. I thought it was going to be super difficult to work with the butter and to get it into the dough, but honestly, it was so easy. I have so much more confidence now, and I'm excited to try and tackle some sourdough croissants here soon. But the key is just keeping everything nice and cold. I refrigerated my dough overnight to let it ferment. And then you roll that out and you roll out your butter. You just kind of whack it with a rolling pin and then roll it out. You put it back in the fridge for 10 minutes at least. I put it in the freezer for 10 minutes to make sure it's super cold, and then you fold your dough over it. This was so satisfying and honestly a super relaxing process. But you just want to make sure you crimp the edges nicely. As you can see, I'm encasing it all directions because I rolled out my dough a little bit big, but you want to make sure you crimp the dough really thoroughly so the butter stays in, and then it's going to go back into the fridge. 30 minutes later, you pull it out, top it with a little flour, and you start to roll it out. It's the rolling and folding process that achieves the beautiful layers in any sort of laminated dough. So you can see that I've rolled it out. I fold both sides in to meet each other in the middle, and then I fold that over itself once again. You repeat this process 2 times, so you get a total of, I guess it's 8 folds, 8 layers, but then it comes out more than that when you do the math, everything together. It turns out so well. That went back into the fridge. Again, I repeated the process 2 times. That went back into the fridge overnight. Again, this is still Saturday. I also needed to prep some onion jam for the recipe that I was making for Easter dinner. I consulted a few different recipes for this onion jam, and then I pretty much ended up doing my own thing just because I thought it would work better, and it turned out delicious. So I'm not going to link this one below, but I'm going to talk you through it. I cut up 3 large onions, minced them very finely. I added them to a pan with a 1/4 cup of avocado oil, and I caramelized them until they were that nice brown color. Then I took a cup of sugar, this was very sweet, and I sprinkled it over the onions. You let it form kind of a thick caramel. Yes, it does stick to the bottom of the pan, but it was okay. Stir it up. You add 3/4 of a cup of balsamic vinegar, and then you let it reduce until it's nice and thick. That went into a jar, into the fridge overnight, and now it is Easter Sunday. We'd just gotten back from church, and we're going in a couple hours over to our friend's house, so it was time to prep the finished product. What I was making in whole was this tart with the onion jam and some blue cheese on it. So I rolled out my puff pastry once again, and I cut it in these little squares, rectangles. They weren't perfect, but then I dipped each side or each piece on one side into an egg wash. It was just one egg beaten with like a tablespoon of water. Dip them all into the egg wash. That helps it get a beautiful, like glossy, golden finish. And once they were all laid out on my baking sheets, by the way, my oven was preheating to, I want to say it was 400 degrees. I put a generous dollop of onion jam onto each piece of puff pastry dough. And then I topped it with some blue cheese. I used this nice raw milk. Obviously, it's not raw once you bake it, but this raw milk blue cheese from Trader Joe's. It was delicious. I wish I would have added a little bit more. And I will link my inspiration recipe for this finished product down below. The recipe that inspired me had like fig jam on it as well, but I just made the onion jam instead of caramelized onions and fig jam. And Samuel said that it was probably the best thing I've ever made. So yeah, I would say it turned out well. They were absolutely delicious. Definitely a hit at Easter dinner. And that's really it for the week. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time. Bye, y'all.